So you want to learn how to play Three Musketeers? Well, you came to the right place. So let's get started. Hey everybody, your host here, David, and today we are going to go over this specific Three Musketeer deck. While it isn't the only version of the deck, it's probably the most popular amongst all the Three Musketeer decks. So if you don't like this deck, you can sub out some cards for other cards if you want to make it more personalized, but we'll be going over this specific deck for today. So with that being said, I'm going to go over every single card in this deck and put it all together so even you can use this overpowered deck on a ladder or even challenges. So without further ado, we'll start with the stars of the show, the Three Musketeers. The Three Musketeers work similarly to the Soul Musketeers, except there's three of them. This card is your main anti-air in your deck, but more importantly, your win condition. Your main goal is to keep the Musketeers alive for as long as possible and hopefully create a dual lane push to overwhelm your opponent. Keep in mind that this card is expensive and can leave you vulnerable. So with that said, the way you play this card is by using the Musketeers on defense and use any survivors for a counter push to destroy your opponents. But the Musketeers are squishy, so any spell is bad news for them. And potentially what you want to do is kind of bait your spells if possible before using the Musketeers. But a very important thing to do with the Musketeers is always split them, or else you're just going to get spelled all together and just group up and die, and no one's going to have any fun except your opponent. So always split them. There are some exceptions to this rule, such as going against lightning, you want to keep them together, or even against heavy duty pushes, you would need all of them to stay together to kind of destroy your opponent's push, since they do a pretty good job at taking out big pushes. A good thing about this card is that it has a long range, so you can keep it fairly safe on your side of the arena. And if you already have taken one of your opponent's towers, you can use this range to your advantage for almost guaranteed damage. Putting Musketeers in the pocket is practically free damage, but it does have its downsides. I won't go into too much detail in this video, but if you need an easy tower, consider doing it. Another tip for the Three Musketeers is try to wait until double elixir before using them, because they are expensive and pushes usually fail in soul elixir due to the lack of support you can provide. The Elixir Pump plays two important roles in Three Musketeer decks, and that's to build up elixir and to bait spells. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this card, it costs 6 elixir place and produces 8 elixir if left undisturbed. Most spells have a pretty even trade-off with the pump except Earthquake, but if you can defend the pump, then do so, since it's expensive and you want it to make as much elixir as possible. I won't go over the specific placements in this video, but for the most part, just place them either in the corner or between your towers and you should be fine. Another tip with this card is to place it as soon as possible without aggravating your opponent to kind of get a lead on elixir pumps, so you can outcycle their spell. You can also use the Elixir Pump defensively due to his Death Elixir, but I would only recommend it for that one E-Giant deck due to its lack of range and proper spells. Other than that, just make sure to protect it and try to get at least one successful pump before starting pushes if possible. Ghost is your main splash in this deck and can prove to be cheap support for your Musketeers. He's best for countering that pesky drill that's been popping up in the meta and can also be used as a mini tank for your Musketeers. His invisibility is also useful to force your opponents to place a card or else take massive damage. So he works pretty good as bridge spam. You can also use his floating ability to your advantage to cross the river and take out your opponent's defense. Other than that, he's just a ghost of the deck, just using how you see it. The Golden Knight plays a similar role to the Royal Ghost, but it is a better tank and has his own ability. His ability allows him to dash into many troops, which can be useful to apply a ton of pressure to your opponents. And when his ability is activated, the Golden Knight moves significantly faster, which can be used as a quick bridge spam to punish your opponent. However, this ability is very easy to counter, so if your opponent has cards like skeletons or spirits, make sure the Golden Knight gets rid of them before he dashes, or you just wasted an elixir, and that's it. A good thing about the Golden Knight's ability is that he's invincible during his dash, so try to use this invincibility to your advantage to try to tank heavy hits. The Ebarbs are the tank killer in this deck, and if left alone, can be devastating to towers. The Ebarbs are very useful to apply pressure to your opponents, especially if they're low on elixir. If your opponent places an expensive troop in the back such as Golem or a Lava Hound, you can use these barbarians to rush the opposite lane, which will either force your opponent to defend or lose a tower. But if your Ebarbs are used to take down a tower, how are you supposed to take down the heavy tank? To which I reply, we got the Three Musketeers, guys, we don't need tank killers. They're perfect. The Three Musketeers are also a tank killer and can do a pretty good job at taking down large pushes. So if you use your Ebarbs to rush your opponent's tower, make sure to save up elixir for the Three Musketeers to defend against your opponent's push. Or if you're feeling spicy, you can just try to take down their king tower, but that's risky. Don't do that. That's risky. Another note for the card is that since there are two Ebarbs, you can split them in case you need light support for your Musketeers, but it's usually better to keep them together for a more threatening push. The Ebarbs can also act as a lightning rod for the Three Musketeers, which is totally worth it, especially if you can heal them afterwards. So those are most of the things you should do with the Ebarbs. Here are some of the things that you should not do with them. Do not rush your opponent without knowing what they have. You can potentially lose them and get destroyed. Do not bring them in solo. Bring some light support such as Helix Spirit or Zap to make sure swarms don't get to them. That's all you need to know about them. Yes. Next card. Zap is a spell. That's it. You can use it defensively. You can use it offensively. The only thing I would mention with Zap is to remember that spell cycle is an option. Zap plus Mirror at max level does 169 damage once, but if you do it twice, you can do 338 damage. So keep those numbers in mind in case you need to Zap cycle your opponent's tower to death. But I would only recommend this if your opponent's tower is under 500 health, otherwise you cannot afford to defend properly and you will end up losing the game. Helix Spirit is your cycle card, your medic, and your weak anti-air. And kind of works as splash as well. On defense, you can use them to stop charge attacks from Sparky and the Princes, and you can also use them to heal your troops from spell damage. On offense, you can pair up with your push to heal troops, but just be careful of spells since they just log it. That was in vain. Helix Spirit also works pretty good as anti-splash when paired with Zap due to the fact that he can kill troops like minions or even goblins. But most importantly, Helix Spirit allows for a quick cycle. So you may be thinking, hey, I could just get rid of him and replace him for something better. That is not true. You want to keep him in your deck for a fast, nice, clean cycle. And also, I would recommend using a Helix Spirit to try to cycle to your pump and try to get that first pump down. Thanks for listening to the talk and stuff. Last but not least, we have the Mirror. The Mirror is the most unique card in this game, probably due to the fact that it's the least unique card in this game. If that makes any sense. The Mirror is useful to replay a card that your opponent may have just countered. So yes, Ebarbs Mirror is an option and I would actually highly recommend it. It's pretty good. However, if you place a champion, the Mirror will continue to hold onto the last card placed prior to the champion. So that's useful for mirror pumps if you can defend properly. But be careful with that. There's not much more to be said about the Mirror except that mirroring cards can cause some pretty nice, juicy interaction differences. Here are the most important. Mirrored Zap kills minions and goblins. Ebarbs are stupid strong. Helix Spirit can survive Barb Barrel. That's more useful than you think. Musketeers can one-shot minions. And the Ghost gets bonus points for being super spooky. Some things to be careful about when mirroring. Mirror Pump is expensive and will cost you a tower, so unless you plan on using a champion in between, or if your opponent uses a really heavy spell against your pump, don't do it, or you will lose a tower, and potentially your pump as well. Three Musketeers is also very expensive, so don't use it unless if you need a second pair of Musketeers to wipe out another heavy push. And that's basically everything about the Mirror. So with that being said, let's put everything all together and let's see how this works. Now that you've seen all the cards in this deck, let me paint you a picture on how you want to play it. First things first, you want to cycle to your first pump as fast as possible. We do this to try to find out what spells your opponents may have and try to get ourselves into a healthy position to outcycle their pump counter. The second thing to do is try to defend for the first 2 minutes. The Three Musketeers are expensive and do not work very well in solo Elixir, so you want to try to preserve your tower's health onto double Elixir and then you want to start doing pushes after that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't play Musketeers at all, it just means try to save them if you can. If you need to defend against a tank, you need to defend against a tank, but try to save them if you can. The third thing to do is wait until double to destroy. Double Elixir is when this deck shines, and when trying to create a push, remember using Musketeers on defense and then use them on offense. We do this to build a giant counter push and be able to have enough Elixir to get a proper push rather than our Musketeers being defenseless. Also keep in mind, you'll kind of want to try to bait out your opponent's spell before putting your Musketeers down, if possible. Usually Pump does the job just fine. So keep that in mind before placing down your Musketeers. And 2 final tips before I go. Try to build your pushes equally so your opponent doesn't just use a spell on one of them and then destroy it. And also try to have 1 successful pump before doing Three Musketeers to kind of help your pushes go even further than they ever would without a pump. But with that being said, that's the basics of this deck. If you have any questions, make sure to hit me up in the comments down below. If you're new here, make sure you guys subscribe. And if you found this video helpful, give it a like. And even potentially share it with a friend. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye-bye.